I'm still amazed by how many companies won't spend $25,000 to do a crisis simulation, but will pay you $500,000 to fix the crisis.
Yeah.
I have clients I've had for 20 years, 25 years.
Wow.
But a typical client would be multiple years.
What's the hardest part about building a culture of innovation in a legacy agency?
So we never think of ourselves as a legacy agency. Our culture has not changed that much since we were two people. It's really a leadership discipline. And for firms like us, ensuring that innovation enhances client value. Because innovation for innovation's sake is just a waste of time. Clearly, reputation can collapse overnight. Frankly, it can collapse in a nanosecond. One of the most defining tensions of modern brand strategy is how to move at the speed of culture, which we must do. Frankly, leaning into cultural tension is one of the core tenets of marketing.
How can PR teams use social listening to stay culturally fluent and build more relevant campaigns?
The fact is that if you don't understand what people are thinking, what they're saying, what the impact is having to your core customers in the marketplace, it's real-time information. It also gives you the opportunity to change or enhance your messaging or your strategy in real time.
This episode is brought to you by Phyllo, the universal solution for social media background checks and influencer vetting. If you work in background verification, brand reputation, image building, public relations, or influencer marketing, you know how crucial fast and reliable background screening is. With Phyllo Social Screening, you can run AI-powered social media background checks in just 15 minutes, spotting red flags, news mentions, and adverse media across platforms. Trusted by leaders like Global Background Screening, Gigan, Prembly, and Essential Screens, Phyllo Social Screening helps you save millions of dollars in crisis management. Check out the link in the description to book a demo today.
Hello everyone, this is Shubham Tiwari. I'm the Associate Director of Content Marketing and Socials at Phyllo, the universal solution for social media checks and influencer vetting. I welcome you all to another episode of Impulse Season 3. Today's guest is a giant in the world of communications, influence, and brand reputation. Michael Kempner is the founder and CEO of MikeWorldWide, one of the world's most respected independent public relation firms, where he shaped the future of storytelling, trust, and social impact. From transforming MWW, as the acronym stands, into a global force for modern value-driven PR to influencing public policy, mentoring the next generation of leaders such as Barack Obama, the biggest name out there, and championing inclusivity, Michael has built a legacy that is nothing short of inspiring. I'm really happy to record this episode. Michael, thanks for coming.
Well, thanks so much. And that was quite the introduction. I will definitely play this back on a loop for my kids 24 hours a day. So they appreciate me as much as you do. So thanks for having me.
You're being modest. But let's start on a fun note. You have worked with everyone from global brands to government leaders. What's one lesson about trust you have learned working with people whose reputations can change in a heartbeat?
The most important thing about trust is authenticity. The fact is that people can smell a fake a mile away. You're either going to win or lose with your authentic self. And advice I've given to many a politician or CEOs are, you can't try to be somebody else. You can't run away from who you are. That will never work. So if you win with who you are, fantastic. If you lose with who you are, you can still look at yourself in the mirror and say, I did my best. But authenticity is the key to trust.
Wonderful. I think that's the line we're going to put on our thumbnail for this interview. Your philosophy has always centered around purpose-driven, people-first PR. What gave you that conviction so early on? And how has it evolved over the years? Because you have been in this industry for many decades now.
Well, thanks for reminding me how old I am, so I appreciate that. I just think my bald head is also a reminder. But there's sort of two questions there. One is purpose-driven, and the other is kind of people first, right? So I've always been a purpose-driven person. That's just how I grew up. I mean, I grew up being involved in politics and in causes well before I ever thought about going into public relations. My household is part of our dinner time conversations. I grew up in the late 1960s, early 1970s. Wow. So Vietnam War, Watergate, civil rights. And so that was just the conversation around my dinner table. And that led me to really believe it was very important to lead a purpose-driven life. And when I started the firm, I was very committed to. I didn't know it was a philosophy in those days. I didn't know I had any philosophies. It's just what I did. But, we were a firm that was going to do the right thing, and that was going to be our North Star. And that led to, a real focus on purpose. As far as people driven, I wouldn't say I started out that way. First of all, I was very young. I was in my 20s when I started the agency. You learn a lot as you get older. I also had come from politics, which is not the most people-friendly environment. People tend to be very fungible in politics. They,
Correct.
you don't get much of a chance to make a second mistake. You make your first, and that may be the last one you ever make. So I started the agency with somewhat of a belief that people were fungible. But I quickly learned that was not the case. And I quickly learned that to scale this business, it isn't a public relations firm. It's a human capital business. And if you understand that all I sell are brilliant people that have the same vision that I have, you understand that this business is very simple, but very hard. And the simple part is if you can attract the right talent, help those people to grow and retain them, the rest is pretty easy. You'll get clients, you'll keep clients, you'll have happy clients, happy employees, have a very positive impact on other employees and on recruiting and reputation. But without that, you have nothing. So I learned quickly that this was really a human capital business and that there had to be a real intentionality to that human capital. The other piece was that it also was just more fun. It's more fun to work at a place. And remember, I'm not just the CEO, but I also work here. I'm also an employee. And so it's much more fun to work with people that work together, that align for a common purpose, that like their job, like what they do. It just makes it easier and more enjoyable to come to work every day. And since I've been coming to work every day for 38 years, if it was not that kind of environment, frankly, I would have stopped coming here a long time ago. It's remarkable to me how many leaders that I know and how many companies that I know that also really are human capital companies like consulting firms or law firms or other professional services, how much that they may pay lip service to employee first, but they're really an employee last company, not an employee first. So I really focus on people first, client-centric way to run this business.
Wonderful. Michael, just to give, the true impact of PR to our audience, can you tell us what's the average number of, let's say, months or years you work with one particular person on an average?
Well, I have clients I've had for 20 years.
Wow.
25 years. I have clients that I've had for 2 weeks because it was a 2-week sprint and that was the assignment. But a typical client would be multiple years, and you tend to keep your clients unless there can be dramatic changes in the economy like we're going through right now. There could be a change of leadership in the client and they just want to bring in their favorite person. But you rarely lose a client because you didn't do a good job. It's usually some kind of externality that really has very little to do with you. But most clients stay with you for a very long time, particularly if you do a good job. I mean, if you don't do a good job, you don't. Now, part of it is, I know we're going to talk about technology, but part of it is how do you stay ahead of what the clients need and ask? Because what we do today is materially different than what we did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 38 years ago. And so part of it is to be a real client counselor. Part of it is to understand what a client considers to be value, what the client's needs are, changes dramatically, very often and very quickly. And so to understand what your clients need, understand the technology you need to bring forward, understand the data sets. This, you're a technology business. And, today your business probably would not have, your business wouldn't have existed 10 years ago for two reasons. One, technology wasn't mature enough, but equally important, we didn't live in a world where one bad X post or a Instagram influencer goes off the rails. It can destroy your reputation and, all of a sudden the CMO loses their job. So, we live in a world where we live in a permacrisis. There's no such
Yep.
thing as a crisis happens when it happens and you grab a crisis firm. We all live in a permacrisis. The only question is it a crisis just for us, or is it a real crisis out there in the marketplace? But the idea of having to add defensive tools and techniques at the same time while you're trying to grow and create offensive programming is a really important fine line and dance we have to take. So without technology and without having the technology like a firm like ours has, like you create, it would be very difficult to give clients the confidence to move forward with a program. We are living in a crisis of confidence in all this chaos. And so how do we help clients make decisions when, even the smallest decision has the possibility of becoming a massive event? And that's by using technology. We have a significant AI tool stack. We use a variety of tools and techniques that allow us to create more precise recommendations that allow us to create a higher probability of outcomes. And by doing that, we can give our clients more confidence to make the decisions that are going to be best for their business.
Right. Michael, when we speak with, other agency owners on this podcast or off this podcast, we often speak with, young agencies that are not legacy agencies such as yours. But you've consistently built innovative platforms like Mike Labs, now everywhere to stay ahead of, where the audiences are going. So what's the hardest part about building a culture of innovation in a legacy agency?
Yeah, first off, so we never think of ourselves as like legacy agency. Our culture has not changed that much since we were two people. And I work hard and in a very intentional fashion. Again, you'll hear me use the word intentional a lot, to keep us grounded in who we are. And so how do we use the best of who we've been and then the best of who we're going to be? So, I'm very proud of the fact that we still see ourselves as a challenger brand. If you ask people here, it's not just what I say on this podcast, but it's true. People here would see themselves as a challenger brand. We have a little chip on our shoulder, which we like. We never want it to go away. But to build a culture of innovation, it's really a leadership discipline. Ultimately, the hardest part isn't sparking innovation. It's embedding it as a cultural operating system. It requires sustained leadership commitment, intentional design, continuous feedback loops between culture, capability, and strategy. And for firms like us, this also, includes ensuring that innovation enhances client value. Because innovation for innovation's sake is just a waste of time. Everybody runs around, we need this, we need that. Why? So until you've really created your hypothesis around innovation and what's it going to do for you, your organization, your employees, and your clients, then I would argue take a breath until you know what that answer is. But again, so if it didn't create value for our people or didn't create value for our clients, no one would use it. And so how do we create value, creative excellence, social impact, which again, in our business is all anchored in brand values and bold storytelling.
Right. Speaking of reputations, as you mentioned, we are living in, constant, permanent crisis, as you just mentioned. I really like this phrase. We all see, creators or celebrities like Kanye West, tweeting something which is like breaking the internet. Donald Trump fighting with Elon Musk. Crazy stuff's happening. So reputation can collapse overnight. Relationships can collapse overnight, especially in a world of viral backlash. So how do you guide clients to balance, thorough due diligence with authenticity and human storytelling when working with creators in particular?
So clearly reputation can collapse, overnight. Frankly, it can collapse in a nanosecond. So, reputation can also be rebuilt through transparency, consistency, and humanity. The most successful brands treat their marketing, and in this case, we talk about creators or PR, but not really as risk variables, but co-stewards of cultural relevance. When you build trust-based systems that allow both rigor and resonance, storytelling becomes safer, smarter, and significantly more impactful. But one of the most defining tensions of modern brand strategy is how to move at the speed of culture, which we must do. Frankly, leaning into cultural tension is one of the core tenets of marketing. But how do you do that without compromising brand safety or authenticity? For clients working with firms like ours, with creators, with firms like yours, the key is to build a system that kind of honors rigorous reputation stewardship while enabling, bold, forward-looking storytelling that resonates. So how do you reframe risk management really more as brand growth enablement? How do you develop a tiered due diligence system, for creators, marketing programs, etc.? How do you create a center of values-based alignment over persona perfection? And then, one of the things is how do you kind of co-create and not just contract with people? How do you make them truly part of your brand and your brand ethos, so they understand? But at the same time, you got to prepare for reputational volatility proactively. I'm still amazed by how many companies won't spend $25,000 to do a crisis simulation, but will pay you $500,000 to fix the crisis.
Yeah.
The fact is that as a businessman, it's better for me to get the $500,000, but I'd rather give my clients the right advice. And the right advice is spend the 25 so you don't have to spend the 500. But that's an insurance policy. And too many people just won't do it, or they'll say, we know how to handle it, or we've done it before. But the reality is they don't know how to handle it with the rigor that we know how to handle it. And it's not a criticism. I don't know how to do their jobs either. So how can we put in the systems that allow for immediate risk mitigation? It's not in the case of when a crisis happens. It's just a question of when. And, if I could kind of hope for one thing, it would be to get people to get more serious about understanding the value in being prepared in mitigation versus the value of what it costs when their hair is on fire.
Right. Can you tell us what crisis simulation is? Like, let's say one mega creator who comes to you, let's say the Mr. Beasts of the world. So what kind of simulation he will go through if he works with MWW? Yeah.
So it's both a technology base, but also a human interface.
Okay.
We literally run through, we create a crisis that, of our own making that doesn't go anywhere in the world. It's not a real crisis.
Right.
And then we pressure test all the systems. It includes, tweets coming in. It includes reporters calling. It includes customers and shareholders and local elected officials getting involved. It feels like a real crisis. And so you pressure test things. I mean, you'll find out that there's nobody authorized. I'll give you an example, like something as small as there's nobody authorized to spend money. There's no finance involved. Well, if you need to go do something, but no one could actually write a check for it,
Yeah.
you can't respond. So there's lots of little pieces, but it simulates a real crisis, and you pressure test it through all the different variables that could happen in a real life crisis. So now you are ready and you are trained when that crisis happens. And this takes multiple different tracks depending on the kind of client it is, the kind of company, the kind of person. But, it is one of the best insurance policies you could ever have, because destroying your reputation is really easy. Building it back up is really hard.
It's very hard. Very hard.
And again, we also live in a reputation economy where, trust and relevance are the keys. So if I don't trust you, people don't buy feature sets anymore. People don't buy from products or services. They buy brand value. They buy brand love. And so if you destroy your brand love, very hard to get it back.
Yeah. I hope the young influencers who are listening to this conversation right now take some lessons. Coming to brands, one area brands still struggle with is understanding the context of what audiences are saying, not just the keywords. So essentially, social listening is becoming a huge priority. So from your vantage point, how can PR teams use social listening to stay culturally fluent and build more relevant campaigns, and not just doing the repetition management or some crisis management?
It's critical. I mean, the fact is that if you don't understand what people are thinking, what they're saying, what the impact is having to your core customers in the marketplace, it might be your shareholders, it might be government officials, it might be consumers or B2B audience, but understanding how that ecosystem is going to influence all your key stakeholders, understanding what your key stakeholders feel. And the good thing about it is that it's real time information. So, and it also gives you the opportunity to change or enhance your messaging or your strategy in real time. So there's very little that's more important than social listening to, one, ensure you don't have a crisis, you understand what's happening in the marketplace, and then to understand how do you resolve it. Certain social listening tools even allow you to measure and predict the trajectory to see if it's really going to be a crisis or not. Because often things feel like a crisis to you or to your company that really aren't a crisis out in the world. And often things you think are no big deal end up being a crisis. So it gives you both the ability to decide on, so let's start with, it's not a crisis, just to decide on what your program should be. How are you going to earn that relevant? How are you going to earn that trust and be relevant to your core buyer, your core consumer, your core audience, your core stakeholders? Social listening is, if not the most important, critical. So your objective is not going in there to prevent a crisis. Your objective is to go there and build a program that's going to accomplish an objective: sell more product, get more people to join your organization, create goodwill in the community, whatever it might be. But it's also there to inform and to be a critical tool when and if that or something totally not related to that program become a crisis. But I would argue that there's very little that's more important from a proactive, objective-based marketing strategy, and there's very little from a crisis communication, fix a problem tool, need for a tool that does social listening and does it well, because there's a lot of social listening tools out there that some are good, some aren't so good. And so there's real information if you know how to use it. How do you even create, one of the most important pieces of social listening is to the 80-20 rule. Typically 80% of the information is coming from 20% of people on the internet. So there are leaders in everything else. There are leaders of the conversation. You don't necessarily then need to impact every person, but if you impact those 10 people that are leading the conversation, and you know who those 10 people are, and you know what they care about, you've now resolved 80% of your problem.
That's a very good advice. Speaking of AI is everywhere. A lot of startups have sprung up, and Y Combinator recently, released a statistic which essentially says that 80% startups that are coming in Y Combinator are AI based. So my question to you, Michael, is how AI is impacting your day-to-day job at MWW. In what ways have you incorporated AI in your workflow?
Well, we've always been a data first organization. Now we're an AI first organization. Now AI is data, right? So it's what it can do with that data. So we began on a journey 2 years ago to define how we are going to use AI and what its value was going to be for us, our people, and our clients. So we began internally with our own operations by taking all the disparate systems we use to run our business internally and creating a unified data lake and a unified system that allows us to run our own business in a much more efficient way, which then gives great value to our clients because they're getting better value for their money. And then we began to think about just as an operating principle. And we came up with really two tracks that AI will be critical for us. One is, can it allow us to do something faster, better, cheaper? So that's the first one, because you can run around and spend a lot of money, but it's not really helping you to do what you need it to do, what your clients need, what your employees need. So faster, better, cheaper. Now, cheaper is not just cheaper for us. I mean, I have always wanted to reduce the amount of non-value added work we produce for clients and use those same budgets to create more value added work. So to give you an example, media monitoring or creating media lists, which are important for a campaign, but should be able to be done by technology. Up to now, they haven't been, but now they can be. So the same budget that used to have to go into what is a critical service to clients, if I can have it done by technology and have it done just as well as by a human, then I can take those same people and put them into other roles that I believe create greater higher value for the client. If I can now do something more cheaply, then I look forward to the day where I can call the client and I can pass along those savings to them. I want to be the first PR firm that calls up a client and says, hey, I'm going to reduce your budget because I'm saving money. We're not there yet, but we're not far away from that. So that's one thing. And the second piece goes back to my theory about crisis of confidence. And it's actually more than a theory. We have a lot of data on this. And so if I can use AI to do real-time testing of everything, visuals, taglines, copy, I can do real-time testing of everything we're doing. There's no more guessing. Yep. We can do real-time testing of influencers, of creators, and see, do they resonate? Are they believable? Are they relevant? 150 different attributes behind any piece of marketing, including creators. And we have a very significant tool stack, which we call Prisma AI, which is our AI tool stack, that allows us to do, which is my next hypothesis, which is, how do you fix this crisis of confidence? And one is, the way you fix it is certainty. Now, we can't give clients certainty, but can we get closer to certainty? We can. And as AI gets even better and more developed and more, right now we're in the first out of the first inning, really, of AI. But we can come much closer to, probability of outcome today based on the precision by which we're giving advice and tools, by how we measure a campaign, by how we can really understand, what is going to be an effective earned media strategy with the press and with our target audiences. We can do all that in a matter of minutes now, if not seconds, with AI. I can mimic a client's voice. I'm not talking about cloning. I'm talking about truly understanding a client's voice. So when you're dealing in professional services, often it could take a month to get something approved by compliance. Now, if I have a bot that we've created that has everything a CEO has ever said. So this is all in the public domain. There's nothing that's not been said publicly before. And I can now use that to write a blog post, a script, a position paper. Compliance is going to be able to prove that in a matter of hours, not in a matter of months. So because we can show them that this is based on publicly available information that the CEO's already said. So, or another executive. So that's just a small example. Today, obviously, we've gone from SEO to GEO. I can use AI to scrape every LLM to understand exactly what the LLMs are saying, and then more importantly, understand where is that inaccurate information coming from. It'll tell me exactly where it's coming from. A trade publication, a competitor's website, in many cases their own website, and we can then go fix those LLMs based on where the inaccurate or negative generated information is coming from. Same thing in positive. We could see what's impacting it from a positive perspective and design a strategy about how do you continue to feed the LLMs based on positive information. So there's a whole skew of tools that allow for much more precision, much more predictability. And every day we're looking at adding more tools. But again, the key, though, which I think is a big difference between an independent mid-sized firm and a holding company, is one, I don't have a compliance department I've got to get this through. Two, I don't have a board of directors I have to get this through. I don't have a whole legal department I have to get this through. And I can get adoption quickly. When I have 300 employees versus 10,000 employees, my ability to get this actually used and adopted is, you could have all tools in the world, but if no one's using them and people aren't adopting them in their day-to-day work, then they have no value at all. I mean, you talk to somebody who works at a global agency, as I do, they don't have enough seats. They don't have enough training. I'm not saying nobody's using it, but I have to tell you, I haven't met a person yet who is. And I'm not saying they won't eventually get there, but, we have full adoption. We're using it today. And today we have the same, if not better, tools than the holding companies, because I know exactly who they're buying them from and I know who we're buying them from. But our go-to-market, our ability to go to market is, we're agile. We're fast. We can turn on a dime. Holding companies, it's not a criticism, it's just a fact. These are giant behemoths who have lawyers and compliance departments and shareholders and all sorts of problems that we just don't have to deal with as an independent.
Yeah, this crisis of confidence, as you said, is getting addressed by AI, and it's very impressive the way you're using AI. You also launched Everywhere, your social first agency. Please tell us more about it. And from a growth standpoint, what technologies or partnerships do you think will be essential to scale its impact?
We've always done the work that Everywhere does. That's our digital and influencer shop and content creation. But I wanted to give it more emphasis within the organization. So I didn't want it to be, PR with a side of social or PR with a side of influencer. How do we make it as important as earned media? How is it central to who we are? So it was about giving it gravitas, investing in the technology, investing in the people, which we continue to invest in, and then also being able to sell it beyond just to our current client. Until we invented Everywhere, created Everywhere, it was a service that we sold as part of integrated programs, and it was very successful. But now it's both a service internally for our clients, but it's also a very successful organization for people who may not be integrated clients of the agency, who just need a great content firm, need a great influencer agency, need a great social strategy agency. And so that was the objective. How do we really create something that is best of class, has real gravitas, and is committed to having technology-first solutions?
Wonderful. We wish you all the best with that. Michael, a couple of rituals that we do at the end of this interview is we ask for a book recommendation. It can be your all-time favorite book or something that you're finding interesting right now. So that's the first one. And the second one is, if you can nominate someone for the next episode of this podcast, that would be really wonderful. I'll be really grateful because that would be a pleasure.
Well, I would say that, what book am I reading right? What did I just finish? I love Sapiens. I think that's it really makes you understand the origin of man and actually what's led us to where we are. It makes it almost feel like it's inevitable. I just finished The Doorman, which is just a fun read about kind of Upper East, Upper West Side Manhattan, and the absurdity of today's culture of, I'm a capitalist, so I don't want to put down capitalism, but, uber capitalism, which is out of control. Those would be the two that I would recommend right now. And who I'd nominate, I would say that I would even give you a choice between Josh Rosenberg, who runs Day One Agency, who's a terrific guy and is really kind of leading the industry and talking to Gen Z, or Diana Littman, who runs MSL. And she is one of the most extraordinary leaders, not just of an agency, but but also lessons in leadership. Is a good friend and someone I respect and who would make a fantastic interview.
Wonderful. We'll try to get them both. Michael, before I let you go, on a personal note, what's something outside of work, a ritual, a passion that brings you balance and helps you, keep perspective in business that can be chaotic? As you said, we are in the chaotic, economy right now. So how do you make that balance? What do you do something that gives you that balance?
Well, first off, I went from being an absolute maniac 30 years ago to being one of the calmest people on the planet. And it's because, I learned that, worrying is a down payment on a problem you may never have. I don't see how worrying fixes any problem. But that was a learned skill. So to me, I really try to take everything in stride. Since I am such a proponent of taking risk, for me, for my employees, for my clients, I think risk is required, which means failure is required. So you have to be comfortable with risk, which means you have to be comfortable with failure. And that is one of the hardest things to teach people.
Yep.
But I've learned, and again, it was an acquired skill. I had actually learned to do this. And so how do I just keep everything under control, keep things in perspective, whether it's my family or it's my employees or it's my clients or it's my business? The other thing is, I know when I was starting out in this business and people like me would, who have been doing this a long time, would come to talk to me, and I was very polite, but it was like, wah, 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 wah. Like, what do these people know? They're old. They don't have any idea what's going on. And the reality is there's a lot of wisdom in failing a lot of times, and there's a lot of wisdom in mileage. And so there's not much that goes on that I haven't seen before. Now, it might be a different flavor or color, but no one ever lived through a pandemic before. But the pandemic had the same features. If you combined the recession of 2008 with 9/11, if you combine those two, it kind of was similar. And so there's not a lot I haven't been through before. And then the last thing is, you can choose to be happy or choose to be unhappy. And too many people confuse not being unhappy with being happy. And so you can choose to be unhappy. You can choose to be not unhappy, which is sort of like this stasis, right? Or you can choose to be happy. I get to surround myself with my family, with people I love, but I also surround myself with people I love here at work, and we've been together a long time, and we're a team, and I enjoy their company, and I like being with them, and so we're in this together. So part of it is mentality, but as far as how do I unwind, I do simple things. I know that my weeks are very intense, and so on Friday or a Saturday, I need to take an hour and just let my brain relax. I don't watch TV. I don't read. I literally stick my baseball cap over my head. I don't go to sleep. I just try to think about nothing, and so I let my brain relax. But, listen, I have grandchildren, which give me incredible joy. I have a great family, great friends. I have a small boat. I like to just go tool around out in the water and, Long Island Sound, which gives me a lot of peace. But mostly, peace is an inner thing. How do you take that and make it a really intentional part of your life versus having to find things to do to give you peace? It doesn't mean you don't find enjoyment. I do. And it doesn't mean that certain things aren't more peaceful. But to me, it's just something I practice every day.
Wow. I mean, so much to unpack from this, the last question, and plenty of wisdom. As you said, wisdom can be found anywhere. So I'm pretty sure
Well,
this episode has a lot of wisdom.
and it's mostly found because you make a lot of mistakes. It's not like you're so special,
Yeah.
but if you had 30 years of mistakes, as long as you're paying attention, you get pretty smart.
That's a good line to put on your resume. Anyone who's learning new things. Michael, thank you so much for your time. I know it's very precious. And I am personally very, very happy that you came here, because we also invite people who we love to have on the show. So thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, we couldn't be happier.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed it. I really appreciate that. The questions were fantastic. I enjoyed talking to you. And if I can ever be helpful, please let me know. And have a great day, weekend, summer.
Thank you so much. And to our audience, thank you for watching this episode. We will put a link to, Michael's LinkedIn profile in the description. Please find out more about MWW. And if you're an influencer, anybody who likes to work with them, we will get you as much information as possible. Please wait for the next episode to drop. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Impulse, the influencer marketing podcast, is brought to you by Phyllo. Phyllo is the easiest way to get access to authenticated creator data from hundreds of different platforms. To know more about Phyllo, visit getphyllo.com. That's get, PHYLLO.com. Also, make sure to search for Influencer Marketing Podcast in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube Podcasts. And don't forget to click subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Phyllo, thank you so much for listening.